into it. So, guys, it is currently 4:20 p.m. Lol.
Good time.
On on the 24th of July. We're getting ready to wrap up July, and we're getting closer and closer to just kind of distancing ourselves from the summer, which is always so exciting for people like me who live in the desert, and it's triple-digit weather most of the year because of that. But this is going to be another anatomy podcast session. Today, my friends, we have Jordan Milner from the Breathing Process. Not only is he a guitarist for the band, but he's like the last remaining member from the original lineup, except for who, like me and him discussed, was one of the other guitarists, her name being Sara. Really, really cool people. I'm more than happy to be hosting these guys, learning the story of this band. But with that being said, y'all are more aware of the formula we have running on the Anatomy podcast here, now 8 episodes strong as of yesterday with the Warm Shepherd. First half, we're going to be learning about the musician, the person we're interviewing as a person and as a musician. Go figure, kind of full circling that little sentence. We're learning about their story, where they came from as a musician, and what else they would be willing to share according to the questions that we have provided for them. And then with the second half, we will be talking about the band itself. We will be talking about where the name came from, all the lineup changes, that type of stuff that's happened over the years, and where they're planning to go next with their upcoming October release, Labyrinthian, under Unique Leader Records. Really awesome stuff. So, how you doing tonight?
Fantastic. I got some nice Death Wish coffee in my mug, and I am ready to roll.
Hell yeah. And I'm feeling about the same way, but I have to admit, after the session, I am going to bed early tonight. I've been on the grind way too much. So, getting right into the 3 questions we have for part 1. How, Mr. Jordan Milner, did you get into music first?
So I, when I was a teenager, maybe 12 or 13, I was like a really bad kid, one of those juvenile delinquents that I got arrested a bunch of times. I was in the class in school where they put all the bad kids so that they can separate them from the population and such. So it got to a point where I had to go to a juvenile detention facility for 18 months or something like that. So right before that, that was when I kind of started listening to metal, or started listening to music really in general, because before, when you're a little kid, you listen to whatever's around or whatever other people around you listen to, which was where I grew up in Conneticut, and it was always all my friends' older siblings would always listen to hip hop and stuff.
Right.
That's still music that I love to this day. I listen to some of the most ratchet shit on earth, and because I love it,
No shit in
it. But when I was at that age, I was just very, like a lot of kids are, I feel like, depending on your life situation, you're angry, you're pissed off, you have, all kinds of complex emotions that you don't know how to deal with. And I found myself in a situation where I had to, go live in what's practically jail for kids for a while.
Right.
So when I was in there, my uncle, right before I had to go there, he had given me $100 because it was my cousin's wedding or something like that. And I up in around that time, I just was really getting into new metal, Korn, Slipknot, Deftones, that kind of stuff. And I wanted a guitar, so I went to a local music shop and bought a PV Raptor, which was $120, I think, back then. And when I went away to that place, they let me bring the guitar because it's not prison where you're behind actual bars or anything like that.
Right.
But I think when I when I was there, like they looked at something like that as like a therapeutic thing rather than, a problem. So I got to bring it, and I had this little like 10-watt combo amp that I could play at low volume. They wouldn't let me crank it or anything. And it would just having nothing else to really do. I just played it every day, and there was like this college radio station that was nearby that on Wednesdays at like 10 p.m. would play like metal stuff,
Right.
And I kind of skewed the timeline a little bit. Like I'd been listening to like new metal for maybe like a year up until this point. But
Okay.
when I was like 13 is when I really started like playing guitar, So that college radio station, because it was a college station, not a regular one, they played like underground stuff,
Right.
what was underground at the time, which was like Kill Switch's self-titled album, because they were local to that area at the time.
Oh, cool.
Blood Has Been Shed was another, that was like Howard Jones' old band that is still like one of my biggest influences ever.
Sick.
So they'd play like metalcore basically, and that was kind of like, the more I listened to that, I would learn the songs like by ear, or as best I could anyways. Like off the, I had I'm old as fucking shit, like compared to some of these people out here. So this was back when like, because everyone in that place, you could have like a little stereo, but you had to bring it yourself. So I would have like blank cassette tapes, and I would like, you could press like the record and the play button at the same time, and you could record whatever was like on the radio.
Right.
So I would record it, and then I would spend the whole week like learning, just playing the songs back over and over again.
Adapt and overcome.
Yeah, learning by ear, and then by the time I got out of there, I was like, writing, I guess what you would call songs, and they're pretty bad as far as like compared to the stuff that I make now.
Right.
But that was kind of how I got started with like taking guitar seriously and playing metal and stuff like that.
Right.
It was a difficult time for me emotionally, and guitar really helped. It gave me a place to put all of that.
Right. And that's really cool. And here's the thing. So far, hands down, I've had a whole bunch of really, really awesome guests, but I think you've provided the best type of answer for like, how did you get into your music? Because not only are you like, yeah, I used to record on cassette tapes and stuff, but you like took us to the very, very beginning, and I really do appreciate that. That's like the best answer, and definitely more or less following the formula of what I want to learn. Telling your story as a musician, and really like down to the bones, down to the atoms, how you got into music. But really awesome, yeah, of course, really awesome answer. Question 2 being, and we kind of covered this already. You've kind of already covered this. Were there specific bands or artists that really intrigued you, ones that inspired the foundations of the breathing process?
Yeah, so that was just the stuff that like got me kind of into metal in general. The stuff that like, we kind of modeled our sound after. It's a difficult thing to answer, because there's been so many like eras of this band.
Right.
And the original, like the when I first started, like I guess what you'd call the breathing process, like we sounded a lot different, because we were listening to like that was like kind of, I've gone through phases throughout my life, in my musical journey,
Right.
So back then, this was like 2004 maybe. That was when I really started getting into like death metal.
Right.
So I was listening, death metal and like what I guess you could call like the second wave metalcore, which was like Kill Switch, Unearth, Shadows Fall, Poison the Well, that kind of Zao. Zao was one of the biggest influences on me as like a guitar player.
Zao. Okay.
Because when I first heard them, like I hadn't really heard anything like them. And I think this was I first heard their Blood and Fire record, I think in like 2001. That album came out in like 98, I'm pretty sure. To me, that was the first metalcore album. There's probably all kinds of arguments for like who started metalcore, this and that, and I'm sure I can be proven wrong easily. But if you really go back and listen to bands in 1998, I don't remember any of them sounding like that.
Hands down. What was the band and what was the record again?
Zao.
Zao?
Zao.
Zao.
The album's called Where Blood and Fire Bring Rest in Peace.
Yo. Okay. Where Blood and Fire Bring Rest in Peace.
And they were a Christian band.
Ooh.
And they were just something about how dark their sound was, like, and for me, like, when I started really kind of getting into looking into them or whatever, and mind you, this is like 2001, so like the internet existed obviously, but it wasn't like easy to just, you couldn't pull up a band's like whole
discography, social media,
everything on one thing, so. But I noticed that they had their guitarist was black, and for me, I didn't see that a lot.
Right.
I didn't see like black people playing metal back then a lot. Even though, again, of course there were, but
right.
For me, like in the small corner of the United States in Connecticut, like it was a rare thing.
Right.
That's why, like when I first found Blood Has Been Shed too, and I saw them at this like shitty little bar called the Hanover House in Connecticut, and Howard Jones is this fucking huge black dude, like it made me feel like this is like something that I can do too, like,
right.
And I didn't think of it, obviously, like at that age, like race isn't really a complex issue at that time, but still, like, to me as just a kid, it was just a cool, like, inspiring
thing. Yeah. And if I'm remembering correctly, Howard Jones is the vocalist currently, most recently, for Light the Torch, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Awesome. Well,
but if you want to hear where every single deathcore band got their sound from, you go listen to Blood Has Been Shed. That was because, not that they sound like what deathcore sounds like now.
Oh hell no! I know it's not.
bands like the Acacia Strain and like Despised Icon, like any of those older generation bands, that's who they were influenced by.
Ooh, so that was his first project, though.
As far as I know, yeah.
Okay.
That band dissolved when he joined Killswitch, basically. And
right.
The drummer from Blood Has Been Shed also joined Killswitch and is still in Killswitch now.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I barely got into the Beartooth era and like Beartooth While She Sleeps, Wage War era of metalcore. Like, I kind of jumped in it when all of that was happening, when everybody was raving about the lines and I Have a Problem, or with Wage War, it was like The River. Everybody was freaking going nuts over that. That's really when I jumped into metalcore, and to a certain degree, I'm glad I jumped into it then. Because, like, obviously deathcore and metalcore at that point, it was like a continuously developing scene. Otherwise, in the early 2000s, you had, the 2000 emo metalcore merge, which was basically Asking Alexandria. And, I mean, they've come a long way. I would argue that they're probably going to replace Led Zeppelin in the future when they get older, just because they have that very sassy rock and roll vibe, but they're not douchebags. So I mean, there you go. But thank you again for such an awesome answer. Like, it's really cool to be able to get this type of feedback and like just learn all these new things about the scene, about the music world that I'm trying to contribute to. But
so there's more, if you're asking like what influenced like the breathing process as it is now,
right?
There's another like very important part to that. So that was like just when we kind of started under that name,
right?
It changed over the years. Like eventually, this was like right before, our older demos sound like kind of like deathcore, but this was, this like 2004, like deathcore
Yeah.
wasn't really, and obviously we didn't call it that then either. We just were playing what we thought was like our version of
Maybe harder
death metal with some
metalcore.
breakdown. Yeah, something like that. And they like, you can find like there's demos exist on the internet if anyone's really that interested. We've talked before about maybe like releasing them for something because people do ask about it.
Yeah.
But once like I'd say like around 2006, as musicians, like you reflect what you listen to, and at that time, all of us kind of simultaneously started listening to like Emperor and Dimmu Borgir, Dark Funeral, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And it was like it just started reflecting in what we were writing, and we wrote one song where we added like strings and stuff to it, and from like as soon as we recorded it, we all like had this like moment of this is like what we need to go for, and that led to our first album, In Waking Divinity, which came out in 2008, I think. And that was at a time where like deathcore was very much like, that was right when it was starting to pick up traction with like Suicide Silence and Job for a Cowboy and stuff like that.
Right, yeah.
And
Job for a Cowboy is another AZ local band. Like, we got a lot of good bands here in Arizona. I'm like, fuck yeah. Too bad I don't listen to Job for a Cowboy that much. Not yet. Working on that part.
Dude, we could do a whole podcast on just Job for a Cowboy and how awesome they are.
Hell yeah, man.
And, yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of how like we got to the sound that we're at now, and we just kind of have developed it over the years. This was like a string of writing, recording, playing shows, figuring out what we liked, what we didn't like, and that's kind of where it eventually led to.
Not only is it a breathing process, just like kind of accepting everything, taking it in as it goes, and seeing what works. It's also just an experimentation. That's what music is, and the best music is made when you don't really have any creative walls down. Me and Desolate Blight of San Antonio, Texas, kind of discussed this. And I'm sure I've discussed it with other bands on the podcast too, but like, you can be a metal band, you can be as heavy as fuck, and you can have all the breakdowns in the multiverse, but at the end of the day, there are hundreds of other bands doing that. So it's like, you gotta really get comfortable for one, and two, experiment as much as possible. It is a science experiment of a musical idea, really, a creative process.
Yeah.
So.
And again, it's like, every single band is a reflection of what they listen to. So you can always tell, like when we tour and stuff, you can always tell the local bands that only listen to like Lamb of God because they sound exactly like Lamb of God. Or bands that only listen to deathcore sound exactly like Suicide Silence, or
it's like
Whitechapel.
Hard programmed, hard written into their brain. They're just like deathcore, just like constantly just whispering it to themselves. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because like that's how you really it recycles that point. Really, that's how you harness the genre that you're wanting to do. I sure as hell, like when I'm getting into the actual process of writing music, which I only mentioned this briefly on the podcast because there's nothing yet. There's only lyrics, but I'm wanting to make music that is appropriate in our genre and community for like Royal Albert Hall, with a choir backing it, with orchestra backing it. Like when Lorna Shore's Immortal came out, I was like, you know what? That could easily be played at Royal Albert Hall for some type of fundraiser. Very similar to what Bring Me the Horizon, Architects, and While She Sleeps have done before now, which is absolutely incredible. It's a big step for our scene. That
Bring Me the Horizon like video at that venue is amazing.
Shadow Moses, dude. Oh my god.
Yeah, that's such a good like concert video.
Yeah.
I watch it fairly often, actually.
Me too. It's so hype, and like especially when it's this is sempiternal, but you can hear not only the choir but everybody in that venue just screaming that. It just goosebumps every time. So like that's when that's when you know that for one you love music, but for two you're looking to make really really epic music and incorporate a little bit heavy little Castlevania vibes into it. And that's basically why I love our scene so much as like the Blackened ambient deathcore, ambient slam, like whatever you want to call it. It's beautiful heavy music. It's music that goblins can drink tea to and be like, "Huh, this is superb," or whatever. But question 3 being, before we move into part 2, because this has been a really awesome session, were there any other creative mediums you wanted to explore someday or have already explored outside of music and lyric writing?
I have always, and this is literally like everywhere I go, everyone tells me that I should get into voice acting because I have a really deep voice. And my answer to them is always, who do I talk to? Because I would love to do that. I would absolutely love to do something like that. And I don't know the first thing about, and I have a full recording studio. Like I could easily make this happen. I just don't know like who I'm supposed to give it to like audition for something. So if anyone out there is like, a scout for voice actors or something like that,
right,
and sees this and wants to just, slide me some information,
right,
I am ready to, I'm ready to go.
So hands down, right off the top of my head, I would suggest you get in contact with Mark Garrett. He does, I don't know if you're familiar with Kardashev Academy, the channel he does reactions on, but he also yeah. So that dude, he does voice acting. I don't think it's official, but all I know is he's done videos to where he's like doing a more clown-friendly character or whatever, and he does that shit all the time, and it's really cool. But I don't know if he's in touch with anybody professional on his end, but that could be where you gotta go to find that out. Either Mark Garrett, Tyler Shelton of Traders, or even Dickie Allen, because they all do a very, very, like, they want to incorporate their vocal process into acting, like voice acting. So that might be the best place where I would go first. And I mean, hell, there you go.
I'm gonna message all of them the moment we're done here.
Right? There you go.
I'm in the wrong business.
No, dude, like I'm all about that too. If as soon as I really just learn how to harness my voice more and bring in that D. Bradley Baker vibe to the table, just learn how to do animal sounds too, because, well, gutturals and tunnel throat can be a wide variety of monsters. Half the time we're compared to pterodactyls or raptors or goblins or ogres or whatever. So, like, there you go. The gateways are opening for you and you don't even know. But yeah, that's really awesome. So voice acting, there we go. Another guy in the scene who would love to do voice acting has been recommended to do voice acting, and therefore the gates are not going to be, they're not going to be closed forever. Sooner or later, people, it'll happen. You'll start seeing vocalists from all over the scene start contributing their talent, contributing their vocal cords to monsters. Your favorite little evil characters on shows will be voiced by people in the deathcore scene. Be freaking ready for that. And I really do appreciate that answer. With that being said, we're going to wrap up the first half of the Anatomy podcast session here with Mr. Jordan Milner of The Breathing Process. Again and again, it's been really awesome having you. So thank you for taking the time and talking with us about all that there is to be asked about according to these questions. That way we're not going out of bounds and stressing you out or freaking you out, because I know I would be spooked if people started asking me random questions about my life. But question 1 being, how was The Breathing Process decided as far as the band name? This is like my favorite question to ask. It's always something I ask every band. Take it away, my friend.
Okay, so this is going to be a really disappointing answer. I honestly don't know. Like, whenever we started, we were like, just, pissing around in a practice space, like trying to write songs, whatever. The topic of discussion came up for a band name, and like, I think the first suggestion, at least related to this one, was the breathing method, which I immediately thought like, that's
Yeah,
not that cool.
it's kind of
Um,
dry.
so back then, I was really like into the like the Christian metalcore scene.
Mm.
Um, I am absolutely not a Christian at all, but at the time, like, it was something I definitely explored because um, honestly, like when I got um, out of like juvie, I met this band from Connecticut called Life in Your Way because they practiced at the house directly behind mine,
Oh,
like
okay.
across the backyard. I would hear them all the time, and they were like a Christian hardcore band. And in Connecticut, like they're really really big. Like they're doing like a reunion show. I think in a couple months, and it's sold out in like 2 days. Them and there's a hardcore band called With Honor that guitar from life. Um, it's yeah. Anyways, so they were like, I would start just kind of hanging out with them and stuff because I didn't really know. Like I'd kind of gotten away from all of like the bad kids I was hanging out with before I
Right.
went there and stuff, and just kind of needed a new crowd and whatnot. And mind you, I was like I think 14 or 15 or something. Like I would like ride to their shows with them, and so that's how I actually started getting into like the scene, quote unquote,
Yeah.
was riding in their van and like going to their shows and stuff. So they would their guitarist would like give me like CDs all the time, and he had like an actual amp. Like I still had a shitty combo amp at the time, so like whenever they weren't practicing, like I'd go over there and he'd let me like plug my shitty PV guitar into his giant amp rig and just jam out for like an hour. So anyway, so like I came across this album by a band called Living Sacrifice called The Hammering Process. And whenever we were like years later when we were like talking about band names for this, that name just clicked, and instead of the breathing method, it became the breathing process.
Right. Yeah, no, that's pretty
And
cool. That's a story.
I had said that out loud, and that was just kind of it. Like I don't want to say there's no special meaning to it, because it does mean something, I guess. But as far as how it was formulated, like that's how the name
It was casual.
came up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we just kind of established to it after we know. It's
Yeah.
very much the essence of life is breathing and staying alive, no matter what. That's kind of what it means to us now. But
Like, yeah. It's-
times to ash together.
Yeah. And the thing is, too, like, no need to feel ashamed or, like, just, like, awkward about it, because most of the bands I've interviewed on here, including Signs of the Swarm, more or less, they don't really have big meanings behind them. At least the names don't. More or less just, like, a question I ask every band just in case, because, like, you never know. There could be a massive story even behind one word. Sure as hell, bands like Spite, Darius Tarani, that project is basically the only thing, quote, keeping him out of a psych ward. I'm like, what the fuck?
That dude is one of the best frontmen I've ever seen.
He's really high.
We've played with them like twice. I've been to a couple of their shows. Like the amount of energy that he gives off is just insane to me. Like I could watch them play every day of the week if I could.
Yeah. And I can definitely
I would
agree
watch
with that.
them play every day of the week if I could. But yeah, they're a great band, and they're great for a lot of like, because there's they capture that energy of like kids on the edge of fucking mental breakdown, and there's probably a lot of them out there, and to have somebody like that charismatic like give off that kind of energy, I imagine it helps a lot of people. And
right.
They're a great band for that.
Yeah. I'm just really hyped to see like when they start releasing news about their next release, because all I know is as of last year, both Body Snatcher, Enterprise Earth, and Spite, they were all briefly on Stay Sick Records. But I can only imagine that because of quarantine, they all hopped right off. Like, they're all doing their own thing. I know Enterprise Earth and Body Snatcher is now on E1, which I don't think is a record label, more or less a channel that, like, endorses and promotes their content. That way they're not doing it all on their own. But, like, it's not a record label. So I'm like, there you go.
E1 used to be Koch Records. They changed the name like years ago. And I know like Good Fight Records, which is Carl who used to run Ferret Records.
Okay.
They're like I want to say E1 distributes Good Fight, so like they
Yes.
have kind of a direct pipeline to them. So I like E1 is definitely a label.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, they're I think they're now just more focused on metal. Like Koch Records used to have like huge rappers, and then somewhere in like I want to say like early or mid 2000s, they changed the name to E1.
Well, I mean, yeah, I didn't know that, so now I do. And I mean, there you go. Like, just briefly speaking on that, it seemed that last year, like, a lot of bands decided to do that. I know plenty of bands wanted to go somewhat independent. Angel Maker, that they for sure did. Like, I know they have no record label, and now they are the housing brand for Carcosa, for, like, 4 other different projects going on, and that's just talking about bands. Then you have yet to, like, look at the clothing brands and stuff, but it's just, like, a really cool thing to think about that, you know, adapt and overcome. But third question,
because nowadays,
no, you're good. You're good. Just like trying to stay away from mentioning other bands and stuff like that, just because, like, who knows?
I have a million thoughts on like music industry stuff and whatnot. So if you ever want to dive into that kind of thing, you know,
oh yeah,
happy to talk about it.
Hell yeah, man. That's the really juicy stuff I want to learn. I can't lie. And I mean, the Anatomy podcast, it's more or less about perspective with each of the individual bands. That was a tongue twister for a second. But like, yeah, being that I'm wanting to involve myself with in the future with my primary project, definitely not a band, just lyrics and graphics right now, Blind Without Our Failures. Like, I definitely want to throw that into the music industry, but in the right side of the music industry. And among other things, I'm like wanting to get educated in music business and get into marketing. I already know how to do graphic design pretty well. So, I mean, literally it's just about learning the product for me and not getting screwed over massively by major record labels. Not saying any specific ones, because I don't know.
I mean, nowadays with how just the music business in general has evolved, you know, with social media. So like someone actually asked me about this like not too long ago, where you take something like MySpace, which did 2 things. It completely it created a platform where bands could grow without a label, where they could just exist and people could find them without being like without needing record label marketing budget to push them to the forefront. But it simultaneously it kind of killed the music industry's filtering process of, you know, if how old are you?
I'm 21.
Okay, so like in the 90s, the bands that everyone heard about were like the cream of the crop out of the thousands of demo submissions that they got,
right?
Know? Which is why almost every band that any of those labels pushed found some kind of success, because it was the amount of bands being pushed in everyone's face was pretty small. With MySpace, every band on Earth had a platform. Every band on Earth wanted to go on tour. It oversaturated the market in a lot of ways. So it kind of, you know, it was a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. And it's not like anyone's fault or anything like that. It's just what happened. No one could have had that foresight to begin with, you know. it seemed like a great idea. Like, we'll give every band, the opportunity to exist and grow. And how could that possibly sound like a bad thing? And it's just kind of the natural timeline of it. It made it actually kind of difficult for bands to tour because every band was touring.
Yeah,
quote unquote.
Exactly.
But now, after that, like the post MySpace era, like you have so many tools for marketing that you don't need a label for.
Right.
I mean, you take a band like Shadow of Intent is probably the best example. Mind you, every band isn't going to be Shadow of Intent.
Yeah.
Not every band is going to just garner millions of YouTube views and whatnot. But every label that signs metal bands on planet Earth has tried to sign them, and they don't do it because they don't need it. Like, what if you really ask yourself what a record label is? It's a company that basically loans you money to get some shit happen, to make your music videos, to make records.
And see, that's what I was thinking the whole time. That's what I was thinking the whole time.
It's not that like you don't need them now, because you definitely, like, having a label definitely gives you a leg up on a lot of things.
Right.
And we've kind of found that out with our last record, because we self-released it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, on the one hand, it's really cool not having to like worry about splitting, your streaming royalties and everything with a label.
Yeah.
But you miss out on just that branding and like that marketing that labels do. That your record is everywhere, your name is everywhere.
Right. Right.
So like if you're in like this anomaly of a situation like Shadow of Intent, where you can build, this massive audience online and kind of skip over having a label or having a manager and get yourself like, a huge booking agent, you don't need a label. There's nothing. There's no other than the kind of primary financing to get things done. But their guitarist is like a really good producer, so they don't need like album recording budget money.
Right.
Necessarily. They don't. I mean, like, so it's
it gets complicated.
There's a lot of bands now that are we're seeing kind of the trend of that, where they're going for the more independent route because it's just less ways to split money. But at the same time, not every band is going to be able to do what, the small select few examples that you might be able to find of a band that's remained independent and can still be successful.
Right.
Like, not every band is going to be able to do that. It's just not possible.
Right.
So if you're one of those like 1 in a million bands, it's amazing. Like, you find this massive success without needing a record label. But for the most part,
it's a good idea.
If you're able to, like, it's just, like for us, I mean, with like, they've been awesome to us so far, and they've given us way more than possibly asked for to make. And I would much rather do this than all of the other work that goes into releasing a record.
Right.
That you have to independent. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of like a like a state of affairs address on the music industry.
Right.
I guess.
Right.
So
and, we love Unique Leader.
Definitely do more independent things than they used to be able to, but it's a lot more work than I think a lot of bands realize it is to do an album campaign independently.
Exactly.
And it's so much easier to just not have to deal with it.
Right. And not even specifically talking about record labels and stuff. Again, disclaimer, I'm not in the music industry yet. This is mainly, like, the Anatomy podcast, it's mainly perspective, but it's also a means to kind of like learn very delicately, because this is foreign ground. This is no man's land. Like, a person who writes lyrics and does graphics every now and then, compared to these established bands, these record labels, boom, boom, boom. That's the music world. Like, very, very delicately, just kind of dipping the toes in the water and stuff like that. That's one mission I'm trying to accomplish here. That, and to make friends. Hell yeah. So
definitely a good way to make friends.
Yeah, exactly. Just like a year or two from now, whomever I happen to have on the podcast, like, hey, remember when we like hung out and talked I asked a whole bunch of questions. I basically did a documentary or whatever, even though it was
Yeah.
like just one camera, one angle, one perspective. I told your story. Do you guys want to go on tour? Like, that's it's a dream. It's definitely a pipe dream, but that's how the best things are made. But yeah, like awesome music world, and we here love Unique Leader Records because we've hosted more than enough bands and plenty more to come from the record label. It's really been cool, and hopefully, I mean, hell, I would love to sit down and talk with Jamie Graham sooner or later. He seems like a really cool guy, and
Jamie
Viscera
Graham.
is badass. Like, guaranteed, man.
Yeah, I've so Jamie Graham used to own Siege of Amida Records,
Okay.
which he was the one who signed us in the first place,
Right.
like in 2008. And he had like Whitechapel. This was like right before they signed him Metal Blade. So like Somatic Defilement, that came out. Wait, is that the name of the record?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That came out on Siege of Amida, and then everything after it came out on Metal Blade.
That's really cool.
So I've known Jamie since like 2007 probably, I think, and he's a great dude and he'd be a really good guest for you to have because he's got a lot of valuable insight on the scene, on music in general. And he also plays in a band that's really fucking good.
Dude, I love Viscera so much. And Jamie, let's make it happen, man. Like, let's do it. I'd love to have you on here.
He actually did one of our songs on the album. Did a guest spot on it.
He's been doing that a lot recently.
Track, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's hype. That's even more hype.
It's probably collectively our favorite song on the record. Is that one?
I get why.
It's cool. It's a cool one.
Dude, like, I swear, title tracks, they always have a good place in my heart. I think my favorite title track this year has either been Lifeblood or A Hill to Die Upon. Like, such good records, such good songs. We love it. We love it here. I was meaning to have Mental Cruelty on the podcast, but things happened, and, well, that's just going to be delayed until further down the road. So, getting back to the questions on script. Like, absolutely love the conversation and stuff. This has been really, really comfortable, really relaxed and comfortable session. But question 2 being the last founding member besides Sara, how many lineups have there been since the band's beginning?
Okay, this is a great question because it's one that like annoys the shit out of me. So not that you're not annoying me with the question.
Right.
Just so there's like the websites like Encyclopedia, Metalla, whatever, the ones that like just kind of show bands like previous members and stuff. Like there's a really big misconception that we've had like 50 members of our band or something like that. And a lot of people that are listed on there were like, some of them had never played a show with us ever. Like, I don't know how some names got in the list of like some of them when I'd read it, I'd be like, who the fuck is that? And I've been in the band since day one. Like, if anyone's gonna know, it would be me. Like there's definitely been like a decent amount of like member changes, but almost like to me there's I guess maybe 3 like
major
significant
ones.
Yeah, like because the original lineup to me on the first album, that was a significant lineup because that was what we started with, and that one.
You good?
That yeah. That was like when we first really started like being a band was 2008, maybe 2007. Like if you really like dig into the history of the band, it lists 2003, I think. But 2003 to like 2007 we were like a local band of just ever-changing people, like how every local band does.
Yeah.
Like right. We didn't sound anything like we do now or did in 2007. Even like we were still just trying to figure out. Like I was in 2003, I was still in high school. Like,
yeah.
We were still like figuring out, how to play music, let alone be like a significant band, you know.
Right.
So to me, like those like developmental years, like I don't even really count that because we didn't have records out, we weren't signed, we didn't have like we were just a local, like I mean, mind you, like we were at least a relatively big local band for
Right.
Connecticut, anyways, you know. But it was just because we were all in the scene, like we were all friends with everybody. So it was like, you know, it's not the same as like having to go out and tour to like gain fans. It was like all my friends are at all the shows, you know, like
that's
so
awesome too.
Yeah, so it like to me, 2007 on is like really the band's history. Anything before that was just like demos and whatnot. So the first album lineup that was a significant lineup to me, and that kind of dissolved just because, you know, as a young musician, your goal is like, I want to be on tour, I want to be a signed band, I want to go do stuff. But when you actually get those opportunities and start doing it, you find out pretty quickly like not everyone is cut out for that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Of never being like, we were, that first album we toured like 9 or 10 months out of the year for like 2 years straight.
Shit.
And then the second album we did it again. So like just
constantly
not everyone
touring.
is constantly touring and touring for like next to nothing. You know,
Right.
it's pure passion
Voluntary.
at that point.
Yeah.
In pretty much any band's career. So like, you know, it wasn't like a situation that some bands have where like there's some insufferable person to work with or something like that. It was just, you know, people just grow, and some people want to continue being a musician and some people don't.
Right.
And so that original lineup, like, you know, our keyboardist at the time, she left and joined Winds of Plague.
Oh shit.
Which, yeah, she, you know, and that was, I mean, that would happen to any band. Like Winds of Plague at the time, they were really like, we got compared to them probably the most at that time because they were virtually like the only other band in the deathcore scene with a keyboard. So like everybody, you know, but they just had such a bigger like backing behind them. They had a bigger team of, you know, the tours were better, they were making more money. It was like, you know, it wasn't like a situation where it's like, oh, I can't work with you guys anymore. It was like, you know, what happens to pretty much anybody, that if you know, a bigger opportunity comes along, it's, as a musician, like it's the opportunities to make anything real out of it are very slim. So, you know, she went to do that. Our drummer at the time, he couldn't deal with like being on the road all the time.
Right.
And he just was like, you know, once you get, I think at the time I was like 20, maybe 21 or so.
Right.
Or 20, maybe 21. I don't know. I was always the youngest person in the band at that time. Well, maybe not. It was one other person. But, you know, our drummer was a couple years older than I was. And, like, when you hit the age as a touring musician, like, when you get around 25 or so, like, you're at that age where you can't really, like, rely on, you know, living at your parents' house anymore. Like, you start to think, like, I need to start figuring out some shit with my life. You know, that's honestly probably the what happened the most out of any lineup change we've had is just age and time, like where you can't afford to like
volunteer,
be passionate about music anymore.
Yeah.
And we play deathcore, like it's not, you know, we're not playing like pop music or country music where like there's real fucking money in it, you know? At least not for most bands. So like that first lineup, you know, that one, all that I think remained out of that for when we got to the second record was me, the singer John, and Sara had joined the band like while we were touring on the first record.
Right, that's what you said.
Yeah. So the rest like all kind of just after that camp, like, because again we were out for like practically 2 straight years, like on the first record.
I can't
with
even
very
imagine
minimal time
that.
at home.
Yeah.
It's funny because like, you know, we got in this AP wrote an article on like just 30 deathcore records that like shaped the genre or whatever. And they put our record in there, our first record, and of course, like I was completely shocked because I had no idea like anyone thought we were cool. But you know, when that was like when deathcore was really, like I said before, like it was really in its infancy. It was still growing. Like it was still a very new thing.
Yeah.
So when you're in the middle of that, you don't look at it as anything significant. To us, it was like we're just playing our songs in the scene. Like I didn't have any idea like that, you know, in 2021 it would be like still a thing and bigger than ever, you know.
Right.
So anyways, we got like the second record, we basically just kind of retooled everything. Like also on that first album, Campaign, when our original drummer left, we replaced him with Alan Cassidy, who now plays in Black Dahlia.
Oh, I know.
But this
I
was when
knew that name.
Alan was you know, like a 18-year-old kid from Wyoming that I just saw a random video of on YouTube, and like we just messaged him, and he, you know, flew out to Pittsburgh, and he toured with us for like a year. So he had left just before, you know, so that this is like an example of what I mean though. Like technically speaking, Alan was kind of our touring drummer. You know, like he was supposed to be on our second record, but had left like just before we were starting to record it.
Right.
And obviously again, you know, like he joined like just a bigger band, like
bigger opportunity.
Why wouldn't you
Yeah.
know? Yeah. He didn't join Black Dahlia that long, like way back then, but he, you know, just was doing other stuff. So
yeah,
the lineup from the second record, that one was basically me, Sara, and John. And then we got a new keyboardist who was, you know, pretty significant. He's actually always kind of helped me over the years with like just writing stuff for, you know, the breathing process. Like once in a while, like he did one of the songs on our last record. He did like all the keys for it. I still, you know, keep in touch with him a lot. But you know, he was another one that was like, you know, you just reach a certain age where it's like, I got to start figuring out my adult life now.
Yeah.
And you know, and then everyone else we had, like the drummer and bass player, were always just kind of like fill-ins.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Or for like the tours, we would just have somebody different all the time. So, but all of those people still managed to make the lists on like all those websites as like members of the band, quote unquote. And if you know anyone in any touring band that does it for a while, like you have a lot of fill-ins over the years. Like for whatever reason, somebody can't do this tour or quits the band. Like to me, people that are actually in the band are ones that write material on the records.
I can agree. Yep. That makes so much
anyone
sense.
else, like that's, you know, they're like live musicians. It's the same as like a session musician.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
But so then after the second record, that was when I hit the point where I was like, okay, I need to figure out what I'm doing with my adult life, because I've done this for like, you know, years, and I just needed to, you know, I think I was like 26 or 27, like, you know, I can't keep like relying on like my mom to, you know, support me for this nonsense.
Right.
You know? So I moved from Connecticut to Pittsburgh, and you know, just kind of started living like a grown-up. Like I got a job and an apartment and stuff, and I didn't really like, there was no decision like, okay, the band is done. It was just kind of a, you know, I need to figure some stuff out for a while, and if I find my way back to it, then, you know, we'll do it again.
Yeah.
And I never, like, you know, Sara and I never stopped writing music. It was always like, you know, we just kind of, you know, what happens to, like, what a lot of people I think don't realize is why a lot of bands break up. A lot of the bands they love almost always break up for this reason, is because just the ratio of income versus expenses to live as you get older doesn't add up, and you have to do something about it. Otherwise, you're just, you're going to be homeless.
Yeah.
And it's not like they just stop caring about music or stop wanting to play it or stop wanting to make records.
They can't
It's
afford
that
to.
you can't afford to. And, one really significant conversation I had was with a guy named A.L. Levy. He used to be in the band Doth. If you remember them.
No.
Well, you're kind of young.
Yeah.
they were on Roadrunner for a bit. He's like a.
Oh, okay.
He was a producer at Audio Hammer with Jason. Now he runs the URM Academy with Joey Sturgis. It's like a producers kind of community. Anyways,
right.
We had this whole conversation one night about just creative energy and how, it's a finite thing that gets pulled into the energy that you use for everything you do. It's not separate.
Right.
And I never ever looked at it that way. Then I started to think about it, the amount of time you have to spend going to work, a 9-to-5 job. I think a lot of people are like this, where you spend all day long at work. I'm going to get home, I'm going to open this session, I'm going to write this part, and I got it all mapped out in my head. By the time you get home, all you want to do is sit on the couch and fucking go to sleep because you're drained, And as you get older, that pool of energy gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
So finding the time, not even finding the time, but finding the energy to be creative in general, it becomes increasingly difficult.
Yeah.
So that is what has happened to our band more than anything. There's definitely been maybe one or two situations with previous members where it was we don't get along as people or something.
Right.
But for the most part, that's what has changed the members of our band for over the years. It's just adult life.
Yeah.
And there's not a whole lot any of us could have done to change it or stop it,
Right. Naturally.
And we've never really, none of this to any of us has ever been about money or being the most famous band on earth or anything. It's really just a platform to unload emotions into. And I think that's what it's been like for everybody that's been a part of it. For that point in their life at that time, this was what they needed, and when they didn't need it anymore, it was
gotta move on.
Moved on.
Mm-hmm.
For me though, because it's always been my outlet, that's why I've always kept it. I've definitely considered over the years, and in hindsight maybe should have actually done this, change the name or just start something new. And I still may, I work on other projects all the time, but I've always this project to me has always been the most significant, and it serves its purpose for me in my life and for the people that are involved with it,
Hell yeah.
So that was anyways, there's been member changes for sure. The lineup we had on the last record, we kind of just retooled completely, because not completely, the drummer we have now was the drummer from the last record also.
Right.
And Ian, the guitarist from the first record, rejoined the band for our last record.
That's cool.
So at least it was kind of canceled out another member change. It's it's someone that was already here at one point in time. So,
right.
And then it's just the thing too that I feel people don't talk about enough is that it's one thing to have a band that has music that's significant, but you really you have to find the right people that not only are talented, because we've gone through a lot of touring musicians and just hired guns that are all stellar musicians.
Yeah.
But just because someone's a stellar musician doesn't mean they give a shit about your music. And
exactly.
It took us a long time to find people that really wanted to play what we were playing, and cared about it, and, shared the same kind of vision and whatnot.
Right.
And, so now, like, the lineup we have now is, like, to me, the best one that we've had, because everyone, like, I think there's 4 of us that are fully capable of writing, like, full songs on our own. So
That's
now
cool.
we just have this endless. That's why, like, our new album is really the first one the first one since maybe the very first record that was a complete, like, collaborative effort.
Yeah.
Like, the middle 2 and, well, Odyssey, our second record, was still collaborative, but we were under kind of a time crunch because, like, we had like 7 songs written, I think, and this was like 3 weeks before we were supposed to go to Colorado to record it. And so we had to kind of all get together and, like, lightning fast just put together ideas into songs and hope that they were good enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that one was still pretty collaborative. This one, though, like, start to finish, it was the first one that, like Samsara, the last record, like, a lot of that was just me writing, like, at least the bare bones structures of every song.
Right.
And then, like, Sara would add some to it, and the vocalist at the time obviously did the vocals. But, that one was really like a B record, I guess.
Right.
In a sense. And I, like, listening back to it now, like, I don't even like it that much, because I'm just like, ugh, like, it's some of the stuff on there to me is like compared to what we do now, or with this record, like, wouldn't even have made the record.
Yeah.
Just like B-sides, but
right.
Really the band during the course of writing it was just me and Sara and the vocalist.
Right. And so you mentioned, was the vocalist different for Samsara? Or was it Chris on that record as well?
No, Chris is new.
Okay, I thought so, because I remember a bald dude back then that looked nothing like Chris, and I'm like, wait a fucking minute,
right.
Did he grow his hair all these years? But I was like, wait a minute.
No, he Chris joined because we were had parted ways with the last one.
Right.
While we were still, like, playing shows and stuff.
Oh shit.
And Chris was in a local band called Disillusion Effect, and we played a random show with them in West Virginia. And I didn't, like, we it was like a like, we didn't I'd ever met him. I remember thinking, like, he's a really good vocalist. He's like a really good front man.
Right.
And that was kind of it, and then fast forward, like, 6 months or a year or something like that, we were kind of in a tight spot where we had this tour in Canada, and we didn't have a vocalist for it. And I think he just messaged me and was like, because we didn't make any, like, big public announcement about it, because I don't really like doing that kind of stuff.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
we were just kind of quietly, like, looking around at other vocalists and seeing what was in our area, at least. And he honestly was like, no, I didn't even think of him, because, one, his band was pretty active, and they had a very different sound than what we sound like. They were more of like a kind of techie, like, American heavy metal.
Yeah.
So
That makes sense.
They were not a deathcore band. That's the best way I can put it.
Right.
So, like, but he messaged me, and, like, we started talking a little bit. I sent him a song. He quickly recorded just kind of like his interpretation of it. And I'm because I do, like, producing and stuff, like, I can hear past, like, people's, like, shitty phone recordings and stuff. Like, I'm looking for, like, significant markers. I'm not looking for this to sound like a finished, polished record if it's a demo or something, like, I can kind of hear the potential, I guess.
Yes. Right.
So I had him come up to my studio just to track the same song, but this time kind of with my direction, I guess, and like I can, make him sound relatively polished, just to kind of see what it would sound like. And just his work ethic was like something I really wasn't used to. Where, because I mean, you hear the stories all the time of vocalists in general, where like they don't gotta load nothing into their shows, they don't gotta practice this and that. Not that every vocalist is like that, but it's just kind of the funny like stereotype of metal vocalists. And he was just immediately like, he has all the songs mapped out, he knows all the words, he knows the song through and through, what voices was put in where. All I had to do was hit the record button. And that part of it, like when I heard it, I was like, okay, like there's still some stuff at that point, because he's not used to singing this style of metal either.
Yeah.
Like we're just very much working with raw tools. And we took him on like a week tour to Canada, and he just killed it every night. And I was like, the first show I remember like just hearing it, like, and thinking to myself, like, man, this is not, I was expecting like half of this. And it wouldn't have, because to us it was like, at least like, thank God we have a vocalist for this tour, so we don't have to cancel it.
Right.
That was all that I was really expecting. And what I got was like, man, this dude's actually really fucking good. And he continues to work on his voice, which a lot of vocalists that I've worked with before anyways don't really do.
Right.
Like, where he practices singing probably more than I practice playing guitar. And it's
That's good.
It's crazy to me.
It's solid ethic. It's solid work ethic, and it shows the passion. It's the passion, the optimism, and just the endurance that we were mentioning before with like touring and stuff. It's the same thing with just being able to have that energy, have that passion to want to do what you're wanting to do, what you claim you want to do. And even for someone as young as me, like, if your clock is right, and if your rough estimate is right, I still got 4 years to decide whether or not I want to even become a musician. But like a lot of people don't get that opportunity. They're just thrown into tours. They're like, fuck it, let's go on tour, even if I have like the cold or some shit. Just like disgusting ass fries on live shows and stuff. Like, a lot of bands haven't had the opportunity to like sit back and kind of think about that stuff. But then when you're actually thrown into that situation, it's like you got to reflect and you got to decide what you want to do. Because if not a musician, like, I would love to be an author, I would love to be a graphic artist, a tattoo artist, and you got to have those backup plans. That's what I've always been taught and raised upon. So I mean, hell yeah. Shout out to Christopher for your awesome work ethic, and I cannot wait to hear your work on Labyrinthian. But question 3 out of 4 on the 4 questions that we have. As the Breathing Processes songwriter, is there a story or tribute to something within the lyrics on any of the albums before or even the new one?
Okay. So the first 2 records, John, the singer at the time, him and I were kind of just writing this like fictional weird story about honestly, like it's hard to even remember all of the details of it, because we always would put the idea that we had for the record and what we're trying to say, we would put it behind like fictional characters, right? So the second record, Odyssey Undead, was loosely based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Oh, okay.
Which I had to read and do like a whole I don't want to call it a dissertation because I'm not a fucking doctor, but like I had to do a really long final about the Tibetan Book of the Dead for my Buddhist philosophy class, and it just, the concept of it just like fascinated me, where it's basically like, it's in the Buddhist religion, it's like a guidebook for the moment that you die to reaching nirvana or heaven, whatever you want to call it. Okay. There's like there's a whole nother journey after death, basically, before you reach your final destination, which conceptually to me was just amazing, So in Odyssey Undead, we put that concept, and this is again kind of the deeper point to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is it mirrors the journey that you have through life, not just after death. So every song on Odyssey Undead deals with a specific human emotion, and it's kind of like the battles you fight while you're alive. They're mirrored in the same journey you take after death. You know, that one conceptually is the most significant. The others are just kind of nonsense.
Right.
And then the newest one, Labyrinthian, Chris definitely has a really awesome and significant concept, but I don't feel comfortable explaining it because I'll just butcher it.
Yeah.
And I don't really know it to the point where I could even explain it to you. He has told me, I remember listening and being like, this is amazing. And the lyrics on Labyrinthian are very like, this is a different than what we've done in the past too. Is like, you know, they're very relatable and very real because, you know, Chris went and is still like going through a pretty difficult period in his life, and he really put that like on paper for the world to see and hear, and I think a lot of people will be able to relate to it, and I'm glad that, you know, I got to make music for it, to, you know, be put over. But I'm sure, like, you know, if you wanted to do, you could probably do an entire episode of your podcast with him on the conceptual basis for our current record. But yeah, I don't know like enough to explain it accurately.
Yeah, no, that's completely fine. And the thing is, I'm the same exact way. Like if I have to improvise the way I'm explaining something that someone's asking me about, but I'm having to improvise in the first place, it's like, maybe just go to the source. Like, I completely understand that.
Yeah, I don't want to butcher his work. You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, with that being said, that's pretty cool. We got at the beginning of time for the breathing process, we have a record that reflected upon the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which actually is really, really cool. Because not only is it a story, but it's a pretty important passage, a pretty important book, a massive information for Buddhism. Like, that's really, really cool. And then with this new record, Labyrinthian, we are looking at this new complex narrative, orchestrated, created, hung by puppet strings by Chris himself, the newer vocalist. More than happy and excited to hear the entirety of this record, including Labyrinthian. And with that being said, we got our last question of the night before I let you go, because I'm sure it's getting a lot later over there, 8:32 p.m. probably for you. So, the new chapter for the breathing process. What is the milestone the band is hoping to achieve with Labyrinthian? Whether marketing purposes or just, you know, taking this interesting new step with Unique Leader Records. What are you guys hoping to, like, accomplish with Labyrinthian and the new lineup, per se, I guess?
I think we're all just, we really want to, like, take the show on the road. You know, like, something that we've always kind of prided ourselves on is being a really, like, immersive live band.
Mm-hmm.
And not that, like, you know, we're fucking Slipknot or something with pyro and whatnot, but
yeah,
just we're a band that you very much need to see to, like, understand, like, the atmosphere that we're trying to create. And it's really hard to capture all of it on on recording.
Right.
I think, like, so Dave Otero produced our newest record, Labyrinthian. He also produced Odyssey Undead.
Okay.
2010.
That's cool.
So
going back to the roots.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that, and, you know, with a record deal, we could actually afford to record. He's one of the best producers out there, and, like, it's, you know, he did a fantastic job, like, adding, you know, like, the depth that, and we gave him, like, a kind of an impossible task too, because, you know, we have so many moving parts in our songs, because we have, you know, all the orchestra, and it's taken us a long time to really, like, hone in how to make each instrument work together rather than work independently on top of each other. Yeah. And that's kind of just a step that, you know, I think just because we've kind of done the Blackened Deathcore thing the longest, like in our journey with it, like it takes a long time to really understand how to make it all work.
Yeah.
Like there's plenty of bands out now that do a fucking phenomenal job of it. Like Shadow of Intent's great, Lorna Shore's great, Mental Cruelty's great, Worm Shepherd's great. Like they're all awesome, you know. And I think just especially with a few of them, like Worm Shepherd being so young and this being like, you know, their first like significant record, give them like 5 years, they're going to be the top of it, I think, you know. But just because it's, and I could hear it when I listen to them, you know, like they're the level they're at now with being like their first real record is nuts to me, because it took me like, you know, 2 album campaigns to get anywhere near that.
Yeah.
And they're doing it now, you know.
Right, it's crazy.
But it takes a while to like understand that, you know, when you have like heavy orchestra over stuff, like you can't always have super complex guitar stuff underneath it. I mean, you can, but
it's just very,
it doesn't have the same impact. And then vice versa, like, you know, if you have super complicated guitar parts, then you maybe don't want to put like, you know, 4 different violin sections and a ton of cellos and choir, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a great example that's actually Flesh God Apocalypse.
Ooh.
So if you listen to like their earlier records, their whole concept was basically they wrote their songs to kind of perform like an orchestra. Like, so the guitar, it's like an orchestra, but adding metal instruments like guitars and a drum kit and stuff like that. And from a music theory standpoint, that's like their guitar parts are like, you know, almost like violin parts. They just play on guitar. But it was so complex that like as a listener, it's hard to digest all of that at once. And it took them a couple albums to really like figure out, like, you know, if we're gonna write like metal or rock instruments as orchestral instruments, then we have to do exactly that, where the guitar isn't always in the forefront of every song or every part of every song. Sometimes it has to take a backseat to other instruments, and you kind of, I always, among our band, I call it passing the ball. You know, like sometimes the guitar has the ball and then he passes it to the keyboardist, and the keyboardist passes the ball to the vocalist or the drummer, you know, like every instrument has its place in the mix, but they can't all exist
simultaneously
on full tilt all the time, or it just sounds, you know,
or
not that it sounds like a mess, but it doesn't have the same impact as if you really take the time to plan it out. And you know that's like the best.
It requires balance.
But
all good music, all good ideas, they require balance. That's one thing I've always really thought about.
Absolutely. And you know, I think like our biggest goal is really to just get on the road. Like I really want to go to Europe.
Ooh, yeah.
That'd be
cool.
A bucket list dream of mine. And maybe, you know, get on one of those cool festivals or something like that. I don't know. Just like at this point, especially, you know, in my life, like I'm, you know, 35 now. Like I've done a lot of things with music that I never thought I could do. And at this point, you know, I'm not, my dreams of being like a rock star, like those have been gone for like a decade.
Right.
You know, but that's not why I play music. You know, it's just what I love to do. And I'm in like a extremely fortunate position to where, you know, I can still write music that people deem good enough to sign and release. And I have, you know, a job that I'm a contractor. So like if we get like the opportunity to go tour, I can do that and not rely on the band for income. And all of us are kind of in that position actually, which is awesome.
That's good. Yeah, that's solid.
Like we can all still like make money from home without having to like rely on the band money. And that's really like the hardest thing to figure out. Like I wish I had like tried harder to figure this out when I was younger, because I could have probably done a lot more with music. Like there's all kinds of jobs that exist that don't require you to be there in person. And but they're not like super easy to find either. It's not like a common thing. But as a musician, if you're trying to go tour, like that's
you gotta have backup.
Your number one priority for income should be trying to find a remote job. Like, no matter what it is, scour the internet. They plenty of like fucking, not telemarketing, but like help desk stuff. Like
that's what I do.
If you want a quick certification or degree that will get you a remote job, like anything in IT, a lot of those jobs are remote. If you can find yourself in a position to where you can, because when you go on tour, any band that's toured knows, like, you've got like 4 hours in the day where you're actually doing something. The rest of the day is fucking sitting around or driving.
Right.
So if you can find a job that allows you to work remotely and you don't have to rely on the band for income, you can tour forever and not have to worry about asking for vacation days, this and that. And it makes it allows you to treat music how you're supposed to, which is as a passion.
Yeah, not a job.
When you start relying on it as a job, I mean, obviously, you get to a certain level that you can, sure. But if you're like an up and comer who's trying to establish themselves, like, the distraction and the energy black hole that working a regular job is, really gets in the way of trying to be a musician. So you have to kind of beat the game by finding a way to work from the road. And then you can go tour all year long, not have to worry about, holy shit, I hope I get like a $20 payout for today so that I can eat. Like, if your bank account just gets direct deposit from your remote job, you don't give a shit how much money the band makes. You can just go play the show because you want to play the show.
Exactly.
And that's it.
Exactly. Very, very wise words, ladies and gentlemen, from Mr. John. Don't want to butcher your last name, so I'm pulling it up. Jordan.
You butchered my first name.
I did. Yeah. So I do apologize about that. But very, very wise words from one of the main faces of the breathing process, Mr. Jordan Milner. They have a new album coming out this October, Labyrinthian, under Unique Leader Records. We talked about more than enough. Lots of awesome topics, lots of awesome feedback, another perspective added to the list. I thank you for your time, Mr. Milner, and you be sure to have an awesome night, sir.
Of course. You as well.
Thank you.